So our next speaker is Dr. Pipo Bundoc. His, uh, his background is sort of interesting. So he's an orthopedic surgeon, but now he's going to talk about ventilator. So, Sir Pipo, floor is yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you well.
Okay. Good morning. So it's so nice to see most of my students excelling in their fields, and experts in everything. I would like to thank the Philippine-American Academy of Science and Engineering for this opportunity to share our humble stride in facing the COVID pandemic to provide Filipinos some fighting chance in these extraordinary times. Allow me, however, to apologize that I will be talking in generality to conform to some of the provisions and restrictions related to our registration with the Department of Science and Technology. The standard of quality of treatment when patients develop difficulty breathing is to provide high-flow oxygen through a nasal cannula, observe the patient, and provide all medical therapeutics that will open the airways. If this fails, the next thing one will probably see is the initial utilization of an artificial manual breathing unit known to many as the ambu bag. A study done in my university hospital some years back of 320 medical interns who are required to undertake mandatory basic life support training revealed that only 1 out of 12 can correctly deliver the correct volume, pressure, and rhythm in manually ambu-bagging simulation dummies. And for those who eventually got it correctly, it took them only 10 minutes before they started faltering, either due to poor attention or fatigue. Simply speaking, manual ambu-bagging is not an easy task. One needs to multitask in minding the volume, pressure, rhythm, and even the position to perform the procedure. At best, one can only perform it properly for not more than 10 to 15 minutes. Now, this becomes ultra dangerous when we relegate the task to a patient's relative, because even if we medical practitioners cannot do it properly and consistently, how then do we expect a wary and a distraught parent, spouse, a grandparent, sibling, or even a friend to do it safely for their sick relative? Now comes the big question. Just how many patients do we think have died not because of the disease, but because of proper ambu-bagging? In a nutshell, I have given the first part of my talk, our motivation, followed by our design, and lastly, our progress. The University of the Philippines COVID pandemic response team predicted in early April that if we will not be able to flatten the curve, roughly 13,000 patients will need ICU treatment, and roughly half of them, 6,000, will be needing ventilatory support. Unfortunately, for a population of 110 million, the country only has 1,517 available respirators in the country. But it is encouraging to see that 2 locally designed ventilators, dedicated, however, for prolonged critical respiratory care, are now undergoing clinical tests in my university hospital. Yet, we have to realize that most of patients who will be hooked to ICU dedicated ventilators will first have to be probably passing through a stage when they might have to be ambu-bagged. For that matter, manual ambu-bagging, with all its inherent faults, will still be a de facto procedure as an initial respiratory support for most patients, while they are in transit from community to the hospital, while waiting in the emergency rooms for admission, while the respirator is still not available or being prepared, or when the patient has to be brought out of the ICU for ancillary procedures like X-rays and CT scans, or when the respirator malfunctions or power fails. And most obviously, with our current pandemic, the danger of infecting a relative who is ambu-bagging the patient is almost a certainty. Thus, we believe that all of these initiatives all over the world that use an ambu bag as a volume generator has its undervalued merit. The Vents for Philippines collaboration strongly believe that we have to come up with a device between manual ambu-bagging and the ICU ventilator that is interim, transitional, or provisional, as you may call it. A device we generically call a Mechanical Ambu Bag Insufflator, MABI for short, a device that will simply supersede manual ambu-bagging. that will deliver consistent volume, rate, and pressure of air, and a device safe for the patient and his caregivers. Now, cognizant of the fact that patient safety should be paramount in our mind, we have to turn to foreign guidelines of what such devices should constitute, because none is locally available. Earlier in March, we only had this UK guideline from the Department of Health and Social Care for rapidly manufactured ventilatory support system. We thought, cool, we can easily achieve all of these parameters. But late April, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency of the same country gave a more stringent specification for rapidly manufactured ventilator system. But these refer to ICU respirators for long-term treatment, not the interim device that we are proposing. We also took notice of your bulletin number 14 regarding the validation and approval of low-cost ventilators. And of course, the statement of concern given by the Philippine College of Chest Physicians, the very group of people whom we might expect to utilize what we are hoping to achieve and produce. And that was how this collaboration of individuals, private groups, engineers, doctors, and the academe came about to become the Bench for the Philippines collaboration. When we started our endeavor, our biggest challenge is the lockdown of all possible sources of materials. All the materials we used for prototyping were off-the-shelf surfaces. Nevertheless, we finally huddled to our concept design. A, our device is going to be ambu bag based, followed by B, the mechanical component that will compress the bag, which is controlled by C, the digital backbone that runs B, and finally, D, the encasement that will incorporate A, B, and C as one device. Let us go back to A. Not all ambu bags are created equal. We would require one that has at least a pop-off safety valve that releases at 40 centimeters water, or preferably a bag that has all three, including a PIP valve and an inspiratory gauge. Next is B, our mechanical unit. We have a choice as to whether it will be hydraulic, pneumatic, or mechanical. We chose the simplest, a mechanical system run by a motor. We sat down and deliberated what would be the motor and the transmission system. Choosing the motor was not very hard for us because we had several working prototypes ready using each one of these even before we collaborated. And we had experiences in its pros and cons. And we unanimously chose either a stepper or a servo motor. Our choice of mechanical transmission system relied on the choice of simplicity. We opted for a single pincer arm, which is connected directly to the spline and axle of our motor, so that the manufacturing will not entail machining and milling of gears anymore, making it a lot cheaper. Then C, the electronic and digital backbone of the device. Our engineers created a digital circuitry that will send the necessary signals to our mechanical unit to generate the necessary volume, the necessary respiratory rate, the right pressure, and integrate all of this to sensors to form into a graphic readout and an appropriate alarm system when it malfunctions. All this could not have been done without the hospitality of the Technological Institute of the Philippines, where almost all bench work was done in the Rapid Prototyping Center at their Technicore facility. And of course, I have to say, the dedication of their faculty engineers who performed dozens of iterations to synchronize the digital and mechanical output of our prototypes. And finally, our encasement, which we want to be portable and easily handheld. One that you can bring anywhere, place on top of a bed, bring in an ambulance, place in a desk beside the patient, simply one with a very minimal footprint or none at all. We have started from scratch and since then has arrived with several prototypes. Shown here is version 4 and 5 of our prototypes. We are now in version 6. Probably we will be submitting version 7 to DOST for bench testing sooner. All in all, what we want to create is a device that can universally incorporate most kind of ambu bags. A very simple design that is easy and economical to manufacture, yet maintaining high function that is safe for our patients, and one that can be brought out into the field even in times of calamities and disasters. Some functional features of our device will be dependent on an ambu bag, specifically the pop-off and the PIP valves. Our device does not compete in any way with the other two endeavors that are now being tested in our university hospital. It is, in fact, meant to be an auxiliary support device to these two ICU ventilators designed for prolonged critical respiratory care, which we hopefully see manufactured soon for our country, one we can say proudly Philippine-made. As we have reiterated several times, since our proposed device will not be used for long-term critical care, we wish that the Department of Science and Technology and eventually the Philippine FDA will see the wisdom why we do not have to incorporate certain features in our device. For one, we do not need to have a CPAP and a BiPAP mode, which are necessary in weaning patients from prolonged ventilator support. Ours is not going to be used for weaning patients from ventilator support. We also can dispense of heaters and humidifiers, which is not critical in the short-term utilization for device. And we do not intend to have a trolley footprint for something we wish to be portable. This is our long road in realizing our goals from institutional registrations down to the FDA approval. So far, we are just about to submit our prototypes for bench testing. More so that we hope that the Department of Science and Technology will agree with the issues that I have raised so far in considering our project as a totally different concept. A much more simple device, thus a totally different device compared to ICU ventilators. I would like to end my talk by going back to this slide, which I have shown previously. For heaven knows how long, this picture has been an all too common sight in our healthcare system, such that we believe that it is normal. No, it is never going to be normal. Nobody has ever done a health technology assessment, shall we say, in this case, of an elderly husband ambu-bagging his wife. I strongly believe that the measure against which an innovative product is to be gauged against is not the standards of Medtronics, of Philips, of Siemens, or Draeger, but the heartbreaking patience of a sorrowful mother ambu-bagging a daughter, or the filial affection of a son snatching his father from the claws of death. Our fellow Filipinos deserve something better than manual ambu-bagging. Allow us, help us to provide our countrymen with something better. Thank you very much.
Pipa, thank you very much for that wonderful talk. Like, you're giving me like memories of my days in PGH where we used to ambu bag these patients. It's nice to see that innovations are being made to make lives easier for our patients. And as a pediatric intensivist, like ventilators are a lifeline. So I know where you're coming from.